Gyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chaksurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirbhishesha Shunyavadi Pastyatya Desha Tarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivraj Pacharya Shloka Sri Srimad A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Namacharya Sridhar Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sham Mukund Radha Kunigiri Govardhan Ki Jai, Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Navadip Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Ki Jai, Ganga Mai Ki Jai, Jamana Mai Ki Jai, Tulsi Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande Hari Hari. Hare Krishna. Thank you all for coming. Today I'm joined in person by Panchatattva Prabhu and Yogananda, who stopped over here at Tuaco in their travels throughout the lands. They're traveling about on their way back to Alachua. So we're happy to have them present in person. And I wonder what kind of, question. I don't have to wonder anymore. Meena asks, what were Jambavati's bodily features? The other princesses, Rukmini, Satyabhama, Lakshmana, Kalindi, Mitravinda, etc., are all described as beautiful young women sought after by many princes of the royal order. But Jambavati was the daughter of the king of the gorillas and lived in a cave in the jungle. All I see described of her is that she was of marriageable age. How can we understand this? She is the second of Krishna's queens after Rukmini. Well, for this, my go-to source is a letter from Srila Prabhupada to Radharani, I believe, concerning how to paint Jambavan for the Krishna book. And Prabhupada said he was certainly not a bear. He said because his daughter married Krishna. So he was very strongly built. Prabhupada said something like the African people in your country, solidly built, but certainly not a bear. So I think we can safely assume that she was also a beautiful young girl. And I suppose there'd be other references in other shastras and so on. But she must have been a beautiful young girl because she married Krishna, and Krishna married beautiful young girls. Question from Tulsi Priya, yes.
Hi, Krishna Maharaj. My question is sort of a follow-up on that one. I didn't have one until she asked hers, and then it brought to mind a long-standing question that I've had, is that with a very rare exception or two, what I've noticed in BBT art is that a lot of the times the personalities depicted, two things. One is they tend to fit into a certain soma type, and also the different gopis are mentioned as having different colors. We usually see them one color. They look more European, and I'm not trying to say that the gopis are ethnically Indian or anything like that. I just have always wondered why there wasn't more variety depicted in the personalities, the subjects of the art.
Well, what's the word? Sarcastically, I can say that it was because the Krishna book and BBT art was painted before diversity became the national religion. But apart from that, of course, the artist would have to say, and I'm not I'm a little distant from such things, but the models were typically the people who were there. So in Los Angeles, the soma type of the available devotees was the soma type of the art. Similarly in Brooklyn when they were there, or in Boston, they would have devotees pose as models for various things they were doing. And so they didn't have a lot of Indian devotees at that time. They didn't have a lot of, Chinese or something like that. So that's what you got. It's interesting, when I think about it, looking at Rembrandt's art, anyway, forget it. It's just a mundane observation. We only have an hour. We don't have to go into those things.
I was just wondering if there was any reason why, if somebody, and I don't mean ethnically so much, but like even one gopi is described as being the color of sapphire, another, gopi.
That's a question for the artist. I have no idea why they didn't.
Okay.
Didn't put them multicolored.
But there's no rule against painting them in different ways, correct?
No, sapphire lives matter.
Comment.
Yes, but
this is somewhat related, but it may be my own, certainly it's product of my own limited perception, but if I go to a temple like the Dallas temple and I see the deity Krishna there, he looks like a big Texan to me.
yeah.
And if you go to other places, like you see pictures of the deities in Paris and they look perfectly Parisian. And it's almost like the deity takes on.
It's especially striking in France, because when you go to Paris, it's true. Radharani's like absolutely, she's the ultimate sophisticate.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And then if you go to New Mayapur, she's the ultimate country girl. It's just the difference is so striking.
It's like Krishna's all attractive, his pleasure potency is all attractive, but they kind of focus their attractive qualities in different ways. Anyway,
This is Krishna. He's
quite startling.
Yeah. And he's seen not only that, but different devotees see him different ways. So when he entered the arena of Kamsa, the gopis were seeing him one way, the coward boys were seeing him another way, Kamsa was seeing him, the wrestlers were seeing him, everyone differently. Could you just check the windows? That one I think is okay, but if you check the ones in my room there.
Okay.
We're having nice storms the last couple of days. This is good. I hate drizzles. There's a question from Athena.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, Dandavat Pranams. I apologize, I've missed the last few sessions. Last week's Istagosthi and the last few Tobacco. Hopefully I'll be more oriented and back. I'm switching gears a little bit, and I had a question. Well, first there was a question that was presented from Brahmatika actually, which was, for what reason can one get angry outside of, say, envy, lust, naranartas? I thought when something immoral is done. But the
Say that
question,
again?
when something immoral
Yes.
has done. But what is the rubric that we measure what is moral or immoral? Because in one sense, say laws put in place, which are man-made, we deem or we follow from society what is moral or not. But for example, today we cannot discriminate against religion, sex, sexual orientation, and such. But call it 2 decades ago, there was no such thing. So is it immoral today, but it was moral back then? And then similarly, say nowadays, say the same-sex marriages, many states grant that. So it would be unlawful to deny gay rights, but is it somewhat against Shastra? And of course, you can say at a high level what the moral code is determined by Shastra, but how, nowadays, how do we determine what morality really means? Is it by the laws, which are man-made, by Shastra? And similarly, what was, say, legal today was illegal before, just like say marijuana in many states is now legal, but it was illegal previously. So is it immoral to lock up someone due to, it's just this, it seems like it's changing. And so it just begs the question of what rubric do we use to decide what is moral or immoral? Thank you.
Shakshad Bhagavat Pranitam. In Shastra it said that the laws of religion are made by God. Just as you can't sit in your room and make up state laws, you can't say, which side of the street the traffic should go on, or what the tax rate should be. That's done by the government, not by the citizens. So dharma, or morality, religion, duty, however you want to translate dharma, comes from the personality of Godhead. It can't be man-made. When it's man-made, this dharma, that dharma, then it's temporal, it's relative, it's not it's lacking in spiritual substance. So as you rightly observe, we make one law today and then come back 2 years later and it's the opposite. So these kinds of laws are arbitrary in one sense. We sit down, we have a vote, we say, now this will be the law. And then we vote again and we say, well, actually that should be the law. But the Vedic system is that what God says, that's the law. And you may make this law or that law, but it's ultimately irrelevant. The thieves sit down and say, well, we don't like the law, we're going to make our own law. But that's not finally what holds. So our standard is Shastra. And according to Shastra itself, that may be adjusted according to the time, the place, the circumstances. But the basic principle is Shastra, not what we think or what sentiments we have, or what lobby we have to take into account, what constituency. It comes from Shastra. And therefore it's ultimately beneficial. the laws that we make according to our own thinking are not finally going to help us. They, they may be of some relative use, but they're not really going to help us. Whereas the laws of Shastra will elevate us. That's what they're for.
As a follow-up, Maharaj, I guess what I'm trying to also get at, and I apologize it's not so clear right now, is that, say, Shastra, they're eternal and, it's not changing, so it doesn't address like every little thing, which, for example...
You have to address every little thing. If you know the big things, you can address the little things. But if you don't know the big things, then you're really lost. The basic principle is how well there are a lot of basic principles, but finally how everyone will advance toward Krishna. And below that, there are rules according to.
But I guess could you...
And social. Yes.
So what I mean is that in one sense, I feel like our moral compass is decided by society. And what I mean is, say now there's a law that marijuana is legal. And if a police locks up a, teenager, smoking or whatever it was, but before it was okay to, and now it's not, we would stamp our feet and say that is immoral, that is unlawful,
There's two different things, unlawful and immoral. They're not necessarily the same. And they're often not. There's lots of things that are lawful that are totally immoral. And there may be things that are moral that are illegal, who knows? But they can't be, they're not identical. There's lots of things that are, there's various kinds of theft, larceny, that are legal. There are various ways of exploiting people that are perfectly legal. And the high-powered lawyers know how to exploit those things for the benefit of large corporations. But that doesn't make it moral. It makes it legal. The two things are different.
As devotees, though, of course, we put Shastra as the highest, but when I say, of course, the nitty gritty is, and of course, if we understand the big picture, we can apply it to the smaller details. But interestingly, not to get onto this topic, I feel like in our movement, there isn't so much such a big force behind, say, same-sex marriages as, say, the Christians are against, or the Abrahamic religion saying it's against God. Of course, we have an explanation, whether it be demoniac past activities, that, past life activities, which cause you to have that orientation. But say you believe that one has the right to love and have to love, and say adopt and have children and have a family life, and now the laws say that it's legal, and if one denies that feels that is immoral or unlawful, because now the laws give the rights and you're now taking it away.
Stop. We're just not under any obligation to accept that what's legal is what's moral. Abortion is legal within certain parameters, but those who have a different moral sense won't say, well, it's legal, so it must be moral. They know it's abominable, but legal.
Okay, I guess we won't go into how all devotees are entitled to, I guess, their own feelings, but
a little slower.
We won't launch into saying that, say, devotees need to be controlled by, or all think a certain way. And while, yes, one can say personally, I believe abortion is immoral, but one has the choice and you can incur bad karma. And if it is lawful, then these demoniac people have the ability to do what they want and incur the sin, or incur the bad karma. But because it's lawful, one cannot like take that right away, I guess. And I guess
There's two different, we're sort of mixing two different things. It's not that we all have, when we say that we have a right to do something because it's legal, that may be true. We have a legal right to do what's legal. It doesn't mean we have a moral right to do what's legal. I may have a legal right to abort a fetus, but that doesn't mean I have a moral right. The law can't establish that something is morally right. They can only establish that it's legally permitted or legally endorsed, but not that it's moral. The two things are entirely separate. And again, there's so many things that are legal and immoral, or legal and vile. There are things that are legal and vile. And then there are things that are illegal. You know, book distribution in the Soviet Union was illegal. That doesn't mean it was immoral. It was the most moral, but it was illegal.
Right. Thank you so much. I guess I'm just reflecting how even personally, it could shape, while I can say, yes, I'm against, say, abortion, but I have no right to impose that on others because it is legal and they have their own free will. What I'm saying is,
let's not mix the two things. Free will and legality are two different things. Even if it were illegal, you still have free will, and you could, do something illegal to, you could have an illegal abortion, as many people did. So we don't deny that you have free will, but that doesn't mean that you have a moral right to do everything that your free will might dictate. I might, I have in my free will, I might decide that I was going to murder this person, that person, or the other person. I could think of lots of candidates, but that doesn't mean that I have a legal right to do it or a moral right to do it. Just free will doesn't really enter the picture that way. It just means that I can legally do it. Free will is a different thing. I have the legal scope to do it. We all have free will. We can break the law. All the criminals have free will. They break the law out of their own free will, or the rest of us follow the laws out of our own free will. Giving due consideration to the coercive powers of the state and so on. So free will is one thing, and then legality. And generally, we respect the laws of the land as a pragmatic principle. If you're going to be a citizen, you have to respect the laws, or change them if you can, or disobey them if your conscience demands it. But that's so moral is one thing, legal is another thing, free will is a third thing. And free will can transgress legality, morality, whatever.
Thank you so much for delineating it. And I think it's more so, I find it interesting, perhaps it's just my personality to be a little more soft or understanding of the other. And I think you hit the nail on the head, is just that because we're still in the material world, and from a pragmatic perspective, we still have to respect it. And in one sense, it does shape us in saying, well, that's right or wrong, because there's a law in place and we must respect the law. That's, I guess, where I find it's like, oh, well, what is morality? Because this is moral, but it's lawful and we have to respect it. And if the law, like courts are higher than any one of us, they're going to rule based on the law. And so in one sense, it's right. And we can't force, our thoughts on them. And you have to still work within the system. So it's interesting just how much, I guess it's just a personal reflection of, I guess, my own take on it, or how I've approached or understood. I don't say how to feel about it, but it gives room for more thought. So thank you so much.
Yeah, law limits us pragmatically, or puts a certain amount of force into the consequences of doing things this way or that way. Morality is completely different. And it's also, and really legality has no no entrance there, especially what Prabhupada might say concocted legality, man-made laws. Man-made laws come and go. And there's also sort of a man-made law now that almost that the worst sin in the world, beyond all others, is to have a value judgment. That's nothing compares to that. To actually be judgmental, oh, that's the pits.
How dare you?
How dare you? Panchatattva says. But that's what we're supposed to be. It's not that we can't be sympathetic, but it's also not that, well, whatever you feel, it's all the same. Or if we can put a nice word on it like love. Well, if it's love, then it must be good. No, people rob banks for love, for their wife, for their kids. It's not that stealing becomes legitimate because it's done for love, or that pedophilia becomes good because it's done, for love, or whatever comes next. And I won't even mention my thoughts about it. Becomes legitimate because, well, it's love. But that's sort of the modern social bias, that anything that's done for love or choice. That was a brilliant choice on the part of propagandists for abortion, is to call it choice. The anti-abortion people had the upper hand because they were pro-life, and how could you be against life? But then brilliantly, the opposition came back, well, how could you be against choice? What could be more sacred than choice? And people simplistically think, yeah, how could I be against choice?
Doesn't it seem like we've managed to separate freedom, the concept of freedom, completely from responsibility?
Yeah, freedom and responsibility, as Panchatattva Prabhu points out, we've managed to separate them. So all of these things are, of course, mundane considerations, but we start from the principle of Krishna consciousness and what Krishna says, what Shastra says, what Bhagavan says, not I think or I feel or, well, others do it or everyone has a right, or, that's not our starting place. I should also say, by the way, I think I've said it before, that in the latest issue of ISKCON Communications Journal, our godbrother Rasamandala Prabhu has written an excellent article, essentially arguing that ISKCON needs to be more clear about ethics, both ethics as it applies within our community and ethics as we address the world, and as we address the world. He says essentially that our thinking is not clear, it's not well informed, and that we need to do a better job. And his article it shows that there's a great need for us to go into these things further.
Thank you, Krishna.
Yeah, thank you. There's lots happening in the chat box, and let me not neglect it. Let me extend my chat box and see what's happening. Venkatesh says, I was reading TKG's diary delineating the final days of Srila Prabhupada, which Srila Prabhupada referred to the astrologers for decisions relating to his health and travel. Why did Prabhupada do it that way? And what are Prabhupada's instructions for devotees in general for referring to astrology for performing devotional service. First, let's say that Srila Prabhupada, in the 12 years of his campaign, I think I never knew of his consulting astrologers except in the last days. When he was initiating someone or even doing marriages or establishing temples, or he just didn't check in with the astrologers first to see what they thought. Only in his last days did he consult them about, what's it look like? What's the picture here? And I remember one of the devotees who was close with him in those days, I forget who it was, quoted Prabhupada as saying, "Let's have some fun." And then he would consult the astrologers. I remember from being with Prabhupada that they would read the report, something like, if the native survives the next week, then this and then that. And the native should wear a ring with whatever kind of stone on such and such finger. And, all these different things they would say. And Prabhupada would listen, and someplace the person would say, the astrologer would say, from this day to that day is a very difficult time. The native should wear this and that, and chant mantras for protection. Mantras. And then, Bhavosada Chotamano Virama Ka Uttama Shloka Gunanavad, Prabhupada would pick that up and run with it. So we didn't see that Prabhupada was like combing the country, so sending search parties out for stones and rings and performing ritu, whatever it is, yagyas, anti-mritu yagyas. No, he would consult them. He was seeing what they were saying, but then he was selecting something that was spiritually valuable. So we, have kirtan in that way. So those are my observations from Prabhupada's last days. There are instructions in his books or teachings in his books about astrology. Misuse of the science doesn't invalidate the science. I can also mention, by the way, that they consulted like 5 different astrologers, several different astrologers during Prabhupada's last days. And as to how long Srila Prabhupada would live, they all got it wrong but one. Only one got it, and everybody else was wrong. That is one issue with astrologers. It's a science, but not everyone is equally skilled. Traditionally, astrology is mostly taken into account in marriage decisions. That's the place where we see astrology a lot. Apart from that, we give more importance to chanting and hearing and so on. And astrology is also there. And it's up to you how much attention you want to give it. But Srila Prabhupada didn't seem to give it much attention. I hope that helps. Okay. Going back to our previous discussion about love, Tulsi Priya quotes from Srila Prabhupada, the frenzy of love is the other side of the frenzy of hate. In war, we love our country, and so we shoot everybody else. About choice, Praveen says, what about the choice of the fetus? Yes, of course, it was a propaganda move, choice.
The fetus can't make a choice, so it's not entitled.
Not entitled to a choice. Tulsi Priya has a comment and a hand.
If I may, I was just thinking about what Athena was saying, and from my observation, I feel like a lot of what the problem is not so much whether something is immoral or not, or whether it's legal or not. It's whether it's validated or not. And to use an example from my own life, I have there's someone that I care for very, very much who is gay. And I know him as a devotee. And he knows that I repeat the Prabhupada's line. And I have never told him, oh, you should not have married a man, or why are you doing this? But he knows where I stand on it, and I treat him and his partner as friends, even though I don't, I treat them as friends. At the same time, I respect the fact that their union is legal and socially acceptable within the larger society. However, if someone were to say to me, oh, why can't they get married in the temple? I would say no, because what the laws of the state are allowing is predicated on sense gratification, and what Krishna consciousness is predicated, the rules of Krishna consciousness are predicated on self-realization. And so it's not that I am against him being with someone that he loves at all, in the sense of everyone having a legal or civil equal opportunity to live their life as they see fit. But I do have an issue with the premise of why we're devotees and what the purpose of the rules are. They're not just meant to be punitive or exclusive or whatever. They're meant to help people to become self-realized. And so for that reason, by the same token, I wouldn't sanction somebody having a second or third marriage in the temple. You had your shot. Now it doesn't make sense to me. And furthermore, I was reminded of something that was in the Lilamrita. It talked about Prabhupada coming into San Francisco airport. And I have it copied down here. It says he enters the San Francisco airport, greeted by a group of about 50 young people. As he is questioned by the press, he extends his usual transcendental invitations. Quote, "We welcome everyone in any condition of life to come to our temple and hear the message of Krishna consciousness," he says. And then a reporter asks, "Does that include the Haight-Ashbury hippies and bohemians?" Prabhupada says, "Everyone, including you or anyone else," Swamiji says, "whatever you are, what you call an acid head or hippie or whatever, what you are doesn't matter. Once you are accepted for training, you will change." So, we want to be validated, but we can't be validated in everything, because if it's not congenial to our Krishna consciousness, yes, we may live like that in civil society, but we can't, and we may be accepted by the devotees even, but we cannot sanction it as a society. Does that sound like a too exclusive understanding? Do we have to validate something just because it's, even if we accept them and we care for them as people, do we have to validate all behaviors?
There is such a thing as degradation. There is such a thing as degradation. And somehow or other, prevalence seems to wear off wear down our sensitivity to it, or make us numb or fuzzy about it. But there are things that are simply degraded according to Vedic culture, according to Krishna's statements. It's not that, well, if it's legal and if it's what you feel like, and if it doesn't hurt anybody in your opinion, then we should all sort of nod our heads and say, well, yeah, we're advised to recognize that some things are simply degraded. In the Shastra, it said, if someone's chanting Hare Krishna, we have to respect that he's a devotee. We have to, at least within our mind, Manasajviyeta, we have to respect the person. But if his behavior isn't good, we'll respect him from a distance. So that means we recognize that there are things that are not good There are behaviors that are in the mode of goodness, there are behavior in the mode of passion, the mode of ignorance, extreme ignorance. And it's not that we just say, well, that's his culture, or there's a certain scope for that we look at something that's different and say, well, it's not our culture, but it's their culture. And Prabhupada, we saw, did that in America. He adjusted and said, well, that's their culture. And so he accepted certain things or adjusted certain things. But then other times he would say, you know, our culture should change, that we should come to a higher culture. So these are some thoughts. Certain things, as mentioned, are just not conducive to spiritual advancement, or they're retrograde to spiritual progress. So it's not that we have to validate or endorse or what's the word?
Accommodate.
Well, accommodate's different, but
Sanction,
yeah, sanction is a double-edged sword.
promote.
Well, certainly not promote, but there's also a sort of tendency to want to readjust Krishna conscious teachings to make them accommodate what they don't accommodate. There's a contingent of gay folks who've really tried to do that. They've made untenable arguments for the actual, for Srila Prabhupada's giving sort of a more favorable nod to gay than he ever gave, and that it has a shastric place of honor, as it were. Instead of saying, well, listen, we know that we're not to the standard, but this is what we're doing. We're trying to make progress. No, it's somehow this has to be accepted as just another option. It's not another option in Vedic culture.
And they try to frame it in terms of Indian culture, Vedic culture too.
Yeah, in Vedic culture, this has its respected place. No, it doesn't. And the case doesn't. I've seen the case. I've sat with the people who've made the case. The original authors, as it were, and it's not honest.
There's
well, Tina's hand has been there longer than yours, even though yours is a physical hand.
I just want to follow up very quickly with something. There was one devotee who was trying to make the case that it's not absolutely forbidden in Vedic culture. And I said, then why is it that there are so many rules for the duties of a wife towards a husband and a duty of a husband toward a wife, but we don't find any shastric rules of a husband towards a husband and a wife towards a wife?
Yeah.
It shut him up. He's a good friend and it shut him up. But it's like, if it was sanctioned, there would be plenty of rules of how we should conduct ourselves in those relationships, but there aren't.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Atina.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I guess this is more of a point of, reflection and discussion. I love to hear your thoughts. Since we're on this topic of, gay marriage or homosexuality, in college, I actually had a good amount of friends who were gay. And if you were to actually ask them, every single one said that they would never choose to be gay. In this lifetime, they would never consciously choose to be gay. And so obviously we understand that this is a result of their past life karma, which they, in this conscious life, it was a result and it manifest. And for us to say that one cannot love and cannot have partnership and cannot have a family because of their sexual orientation and point to karma, it's so heartless. And we even as devotees say that we cannot use, the worst thing you can do is point to one's karma as an explanation for the suffering that they're experiencing. And so
I'm sorry, I don't the worst thing you can do is point to one's karma as the source of one's suffering. That
Oh,
might be sometimes tactless, but it's certainly not philosophically off base
yes.
or unacceptable in all circumstances. Or untrue. The everything about our life, you know, other than something that has a transcendental origin, is due to karma. But that doesn't mean that it's therefore valid. The thief is a thief because of his karma, because of his past life tendency to be a thief and his past life thievery. That doesn't mean that, well, you know, it's just his karma. And there's this sort of mundane counterpart of this, you know, well, it's his upbringing, and, you know, so we have to be sympathetic because he had a broken home or this or that, and so he's a thief. But we can be sympathetic, but that doesn't mean that we therefore say, well, then your theft is excused, or your theft isn't theft. So everything's karma, sure. But that doesn't justify, you know, the pedophile is a pedophile because of his past karma. That doesn't mean that we smile at it and say, well, you know, it's just who he is. And, you know, if you, I won't get into all the possibilities I could start cooking up. But it's not that karma somehow justifies whatever we do. Since this is my karma, it must be right. Or because I didn't choose this, you know, it was like I was just impelled to rob the bank or impelled to shoot the senator. It wasn't really, you know, in a million years, I wouldn't have consciously chosen to do it. It was just, you know, that's kind of who I am. And so you have to love me as I am. No, I don't have to love you as you are. That's not who you are. You're spirit soul, and this is your lousy conditioning. It may be the lousy conditioning of ignorance or passion or even goodness. And we look more favorably on goodness. We're advised to look more favorably on goodness, but it's not that this is who we are. I'm, you know, I'm gay by nature. I'm this by nature. That's what's the word? External and untrue. And in any case, even if I'm wired, which by the way is hotly disputed among social scientists and so on. But even if somehow I'm wired that way, doesn't make it justifiable any more than thievery is justified because I'm wired that way.
Maharaj, thank you for clarifying. I guess what I meant is, you're right. Philosophically, that is an explanation, but tactfully, and if we're meant to show compassion, that's not what we say to someone, I guess.
Well, that's a personal choice. You know, Srila Prabhupada went both ways. Sometimes he would be, what's the word, tactful, or yeah, he would be tactful or just not take issue with this or that or the other thing. And sometimes, oh my goodness, Prabhupada would be so sharp. He would be absolutely stern or blunt or what we would call tactless. He would not be sugar and cream by anyone's estimation. Sometimes even, I remember there was a young girl who came to Vrindavan, and she was had some terminal illness, and I wasn't there, but the counselor there, Prabhupada, was like straight with her. You know, it wasn't, oh, you poor dear. You know, he gave her solid spiritual instructions, not tea and sympathy. There are other cases also where, you know, where somebody would give something where you think the right response would be something tactful and you know, graceful and I'm okay, you're okay. Prabhupada would say, no, I'm okay, you're not okay. He would be strong and stern and opinionated and forthright. Which now you're not, we value now being being accepting more than we value being forthright. There was a time when forthrightness trumped accommodation. So according to the way Prabhupada wanted to, he was sometimes accommodating, he sometimes overlooked this or that, and sometimes both barrels.
I guess the sense I get is that Prabhupada was able to judge time, place, and circumstance and the individual person. I guess
you just hold your thought for a second, if I can interrupt you.
Mm-hmm.
The Prabhupada who accepted everyone as they are, or everyone as they were, is the sort of neo-Prabhupada who sits on some people's altars, but it's a Prabhupada who, in my experience, didn't exist, or who existed only in certain circumstances, and those tended rather infrequent. If you looked at it, Srila Prabhupada was straight, strong. There's a letter, in fact, to one homosexual disciple, which is so strong, it's absolutely non-accepting.
Yeah.
And Prabhupada ends up, show Krishna that you're sincere, if you are.
Yeah.
You can find that letter. It's just, very, very strong. And Prabhupada was often like that with his disciples. You fool, you nonsense, you rascal.
I gathered from that letter that the context was that he was essentially, the disciple was requesting permission to pursue this life.
That he wanted Prabhupada's blessings or something.
License.
Yeah. Anyway, so I just wanted to interrupt on that point, that there's a sort of Prabhupada recast as the saint who blessed everything that sought blessings, and or for which one sought blessings, and forget it. That wasn't the founder Acharya that we knew. But I did interrupt you, which is according to any standard. So go ahead.
I was gonna say that's a nice point, but I would say, as a point of reflection, him judging you for, you rascal. Those are two people, disciples, students who took shelter in him, and he had the position to correct them. And then my question back is, what you read, where to the reporter he said, "This is for everyone. We accept everyone." Even to you, the acid head, the druggies, the gays, the homosexuals. He's saying everyone should take to Krishna consciousness, and regardless of your karma, regardless, you can say a person being addicted to drugs, they don't want to be, but they don't have the security or the willpower or the strength to cut it. And we, those who don't experience it, and I suffer from that, of not being able to be fully empathetic for those who, if I don't experience the same thing that they do. And I'm really trying to work on that, as it's been to my awareness that I can be kind and compassionate, but I really am not so empathetic because I don't understand what they may be going through. But the druggie does not want to be a druggie. They just can't, they don't, in philosophical terms, we would say they don't have the security to let go of it. But yet we should actually have a view of compassion towards them, instead of say, put them down, or not put from a, yes, if they want to change, but have a view of compassion that they aren't able to, they don't have the security to break away from it. And so the druggies, the gays, they should take to Krishna consciousness. They should be able to say, be accepted into the community, get married, because maybe this is my view, but because maybe they just don't have the karma to be able to break away from that and change, but they yet should be accepted into the community and chant Hare Krishna. Because isn't it better that they take to Krishna consciousness and be gay and be married to another same-sex person than to be left and not given shelter? And that's how I interpret it.
Hold on a second. There are a few things there before I lose track, which I easily do. the first thing is that I think you made a good point there, that we ultimately want to see the whole world chant Hare Krishna. We want to see everyone take to Krishna consciousness. We want to see everyone make spiritual advancement, and we don't have anyone that we exclude. And that's said about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He gave Krishna consciousness to everyone. He didn't care who was high or low. So that's certainly there. And we saw that Prabhupada, you may be a hippie, you may be a drunk, you may be anything, but we want to give you an opportunity to become Krishna conscious. That's there. So take the holy name, take prasadam, take books, take advantage of that, of all of these things that we're offering. So that's certainly true. But then you sort of segued into a second point, which is that the question of whom we accept into our community, or who's sort of, I think, along with that seemed to be implicit. Who becomes a member in good standing, as it were. And then you seem to be saying that, well, why should we exclude people? We should be compassionate, and all of these people should be members in good standing. And compassion doesn't necessarily manifest itself by acceptance. Compassion doesn't necessarily manifest itself. Sometimes, in fact, it's said that one's compassionate to the demons by ignoring them or avoiding them. That's actually compassion, because then they don't commit direct offenses. So we have, for example, Prabhupada, when he was talking about temples, was sometimes exceedingly strong about who should be allowed to live in them. The lazies and crazies should not be allowed to live in our temples. Prabhupada, not that, well, he's lazy because of his karma, he's crazy because of his karma, we should be sympathetic. Prabhupada, in some, in large contexts, our temples should not become places for lazies and crazies. That means, yeah, all right, it's superficial, it's not who they are ultimately, it's not their fault in one sense, it's their karma, but no, we can't accommodate lazies and crazies. Do we want to accommodate, even a sort of comfortable place for pedophiles in our movement? It's not their fault, maybe it's what happened to them as kids, they were molested or whatever, and now to exclude them would be cruel and this and that. But I doubt that many of our communities would be sympathetic and compassionate and say, yes, why should we care so much about our kids? We have to be compassionate to the pedophiles, to pick one example. The druggies, there are communities where a large percentage, at least a significant contingent of our extended membership takes drugs. Do we, sort of normalize that and say, well, these are all judgment calls, of course, but we stand for 4 regulative principles: no gambling, no meat eating, no illicit sex, no intoxicants. These are our principles. And we can sort of be soft and accommodating. And there were occasions when Prabhupada was, what's the word? Tactful with people who had those problems. But more often, these are our principles, and you have to follow if you're serious. Not that, well, if you're monogamous gay, that's not illicit sex. It is. According to Shastra, it is. It's not that we can concoct something, well, as long as you're monogamous, it's somehow illicit. or if you're, if you're only smoking natural things and not injecting anything, well, then it's really kind of like, okay. There is such a thing as Maya. There is such a thing as transgressing moral principles. Even Maharaj Parikshit was compassionate with Kali. He was compassionate. First of all, he challenged him. You rogue. Not that we say, well, you like to eat cow meat, so we don't, but that's you. And why should we why should we be down on you just because? No, you rogue. How dare you? You're going to die on the spot. And when Kali surrendered, then all right, you can live in these 4 places, which you will not find in my kingdom.
Maharaj, the question is, but should God not be the shelter for everyone? Perhaps the answer is that we should be
the shelter for everyone, but God doesn't accommodate. God doesn't fling open the gates of Goloka Vrindavan and say, "Come as you are." Let the gay pride parade march into Goloka Vrindavan. No, everyone is welcome in Goloka Vrindavan, but one has to become pure.
Right. So we can say be the shelter for those who want to change. You might be in a demoniac position, but if you do truly want to get purified and change, then I guess we can say rightfully provide shelter, but wouldn't want the association of those who are just in
shelter means we give, like, for example, come to our temple, chant Hare Krishna. The whole public is welcome, but you want to be initiated, then we have 4 rules. It's not that we give you shelter, by initiation out of sympathy, even though you're not going to follow our basic principles. We have some standards. And when you lower your standards, you become rubbish. What would Harvard University be if they were compassionate and said, well, if you've got an SAT of 2.5 or above, right, it's lower grades or lower, 2.5 or above, we accept you because we understand that everyone's, got a background and not everyone's brilliant. They're Harvard because you've got to be in the top, whatever it is, 10th of a percentile or something of the students, because they've got high standards. They're respected. The Amish have high standards according to their own culture. And so the American public has come to respect them because they stand for something. When you start sacrificing your principles and becoming nothing, you become, everybody's friend, and you understand everybody, and you don't want to be down on anything because you don't want to be judgmental and sort of everything's as good as everything else. And well, we believe this, but we understand that everybody else, everyone has a right to everything. Then you're nothing. Then you're nothing. And that doesn't mean that we just have to be ritualistically or knee-jerk harsh to everyone, and that we have to be rude and insensitive and boorish and fascistic. But it means we stand for something. We have some principles. And if you want to take part in this adventure, then this is what it is. The Marines, they're not going to just say, well, okay, 3 push-ups a day. That's not, I know you always wanted to be a Marine, but, prove it. Not that, well, 3 push-ups and a good heart. So having high standards counts for something, and we shouldn't be judgmental and think it doesn't.
Thank you, Maharaj. And just on this, I'm curious, the holy name, for example, brings people out of their drug use, illicit sex, they're eating meat. But I'm curious. Would you think that chanting the holy name could change someone's sexual orientation? And I ask because, say, I personally know some devotees at Bhakti Center who are clearly homosexual, but Krishna consciousness have allowed them to curb their demoniac, say, tendencies, and so they remain celibate and they won't get married, but they still have an orientation towards the same sex. And so, will Krishna consciousness actually change, just like you purify of the desire to eat meat or desire for illicit sex or a desire for
Krishna
drugs?
consciousness does change your sexual orientation. The whole world is oriented towards sex. And when one becomes Krishna conscious, then he's no longer oriented towards sex. Whether it's heterosex, homosex, animal sex, this sex, that sex. When one becomes fully Krishna conscious, then what is that? Prabhupada used to quote that when I even think of sex, my lips curl with distaste and I want to spit on it. So that's Krishna consciousness. It changes your sexual orientation from plus to minus, from for to against, from into it to out of it. One doesn't want sex, whether it's hetero, homo, what have you. So it does. It evaporates in its pure form. Krishna consciousness evaporates sex desire, and it evaporates the bodily concept of life. Sarvopati vinirmuktam. So then one doesn't identify as American, Indian, homosexual, heterosexual. It's not like part of my identity that I'm a gay American, what have you. Gay American Polish carpenter. That's not what I am. I'm an eternal servant of Krishna, and I'm not this body or any of the designations or orientations associated with it. Pure consciousness. That's our goal, pure consciousness. And pure consciousness is not associated with these designations. Sarva upadi vinirmuktam. One is completely freed from all these bodily identities. And that is the result of Krishna consciousness. When Krishna consciousness reaches its maturity or its perfection, or even along the way, one gets freed from these things. Not that I still think, well, I'm not gay, but I kind of really am. Now, that said, we appreciate that someone still identifies with gay, but they say, but because I want to be Krishna conscious, I'm not going to do those things. I still have lust for women. I'm a man, I still lust after women, but I'm not going to do these things. That's very, very much appreciated. I still want to smoke, but I'm not going to smoke because I promised my spiritual master that I wouldn't smoke. So that exercise of self-control by proper use of free will is very much appreciated. That's the beginning stage. That by determination, I will control my senses and use them for the service of Krishna's senses, not for these forbidden things. And the advanced stages, forget it. I have no connection with any of it. This has nothing to do with me. Krishna consciousness does bring us to that platform.
Thank you so much. That was an incredible explanation and answer. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Tina. Well, we are 10 minutes over time. We do allow ourselves a little more latitude on Thursdays than on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, but I think we should. Yeah, I think we should stop here. And there are some things in the chat box, but I think we can stop you. And if you like, you can save the chat and review what's there. And if you like, you can bring things to next Thursday's program, or we can go in a different direction. We can change our orientation. We can go to another subject matter. Okay. Thank you all very much. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Thank you,
All right.
Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Maharaj.
Hare
Thank you. Let's go to, appreciate the discussion, Hare Krishna, and the conclusion.
Thank you, Shema. God bless the Prabhupada.
All glories to Srila Prabhupada and all glories to you, Apurva and Kamalini.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Thank you, Maharaj, for holding down Srila Prabhupada's fort.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna, Mataji. Hare Krishna, Prabhupada.
Krishna Arjuna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Okay, Haribol.
Ki Jai. Jayadvaita Maharaj Ki Jai.
Right.
Samaveta Bhakta Brindaki Jai.
Right.
Haribol.